Hey everyone, Dr. Joseph Benne here, and today I'm going to be talking about torticollis and cranial shape in babies, all right? This is a topic that we've been getting a lot of questions about more recently for some reason in our practice from current practice members, but also out in the community talking to moms and moms with new babies that have some of these problems, whether it be their baby's not turning their head to both sides, or they're having latching issues on one side as opposed to the other, or their baby has some sort of head misshapenness. There's flat spots that are starting to show up. Plagiocephaly or flat head syndrome is what we call it. These are all things that go hand in hand a lot of times, and so I wanted to come on and address a lot of the questions that we've been getting and give you guys the answers, give you moms the answers that you're looking for so you can help your babies, all right? So I am a pediatric and prenatal chiropractor. That's why I'm talking about this. We see a lot of babies, we see a lot of kids, pregnant women, moms, full families in our practice, and so we've helped a lot of these cases. And so that's why I wanted to come on and address and put out this information so you guys know what resources are available to you and how you can help your child. But what is torticollis? We're getting right into it. I'm gonna try and go fast and keep this under 15 minutes long. But if you guys have questions that I didn't address, please comment in the comment section and I'll be happy to answer those questions for you below. But nerve stress is basically what's happening in the case of torticollis. There's a nerve called your spinal accessory nerve. It's a cranial nerve that comes off of the brain and goes down into the neck and controls all the muscles of the neck, but also into the shoulders, into the upper back. And those muscles are all controlled by this one spinal accessory nerve, and that is what allows us to shrug our shoulders, to turn our head side to side, to rotate our head. And so if that nerve is stressed or aggravated or irritated, that can cause the muscles that nerve is controlling to contract, and that leads to stiffness and discomfort in a baby. But it also causes that muscle to shorten, and that's where we start to see babies who have like a head tilt or head rotation, or they're not able to turn their head both directions. They can only turn their head one direction. And it's because of that muscle, or those muscles are contracted. That is torticollis, okay? And so why would that nerve get stressed in the first place? Why would that nerve, that spinal accessory nerve, have that issue where it's aggravated and irritated? Usually it's one of two reasons. We say it's usually either in utero constraint, or the birth process was very intense and the labor was very intense. Those are the main causes of this nerve stress, okay? And the nerve that can, the in utero constraint can happen when a baby is in the uterus, so in utero, that's what it sounds like. The in utero constraint happens when a mom's pelvis is either not moving properly, or her pelvis is out of alignment or stuck, and that causes the structures that are attaching from her pelvis to the uterus to be taut and tight and irritated, and so that decreases the amount of space and movability that the uterus has, and so the baby is confined to a smaller space, so in utero constraint, all right? And so that might lead the baby to be stuck in one specific position for weeks and months. And that could lead to the baby having their head stuck to one side, or they can't move, and it causes their neck muscles to get stiff and tight. And so that's why they come out of the womb with these problems. Or if the baby has plenty of room during pregnancy, but then they're born and there was a very intense labor and there's a lot of pulling and twisting on the baby's head and neck during the labor process, that also can aggravate that spinal accessory nerve and irritate it and get it to where it's causing all that, the muscles in the neck, to be stiff and tight and inflamed, and that's where torticollis starts to arise. So stiffness, colic, reflux, decreased range of motion, preferences of one side to the other while breastfeeding, hating tummy time, uncomfortable in the car seat, and facial features starting to look asymmetrical, all right? Those are all signs of torticollis. And so as a baby starts to favor one side, if they're not able to turn their head both directions, that is where they're gonna start to maybe have plagiocephaly. They can start to have a flat spot develop on their head because they're always putting pressure on the exact same spot, because they can't turn their head to have it put their pressure on different spots on their head. they're either putting all their pressure directly on the back of their head, so that's why the back of the head can start to flatten out, or if their head is stuck turned to one side, that is where we start to see plagiocephaly or flat head spots show up, on the sides of the head, okay? So that is usually what's going on when torticollis and plagiocephaly are together. And if you go to a pediatrician, a lot of times they'll just say, okay, well, just make sure your baby gets more tummy time, and if nothing changes in 6 weeks, then we'll start to use a helmet. And no parent or no mom wants to have their child in a helmet. A lot of times they'll make you wear those. They'll recommend that you wear them 23 hours a day, which is almost all the hours of a day. So that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Just take it off for an hour a day. But basically, you may have seen them, but it's a helmet that wraps around the perimeter of your baby's head. So they actually call it a band, or a dynamic orthotic cranioplasty band, a doc band. Those are those helmets, and basically what they're meant to do is to force the skull to be more round, all right? And they don't necessarily address the root cause, the stress that's going on in a baby's nervous system, in their neck. And so if you just make your head look round, that's good, but it's not really addressing the root cause of the problem. So we always recommend, rather than waiting 6 weeks to see if the baby's head's gonna change shape, we wanna make sure we can get on top of it as soon as possible. And chiropractic here, you can start immediately, and making sure that we're able to work with their bodies and get them relaxed, get those nerves working properly. We always recommend getting in as soon as possible. Okay. What other things can happen when it's not a torticollis issue leading to plagiocephaly? A lot of times the sutures of the skull can have some sort of problem going on in them, whether they're overlapping with one another or they're stuck and they're not separating like they normally should early on. That is where we can start to see plagiocephaly in other situations where it's not related to torticollis, or it's not related to a baby that's constantly laying on their back and not ever getting tummy time. So let me just explain the anatomy of a skull so you guys can understand what to look for. You have, as a baby and as an adult, you have different bones in your skull that make up your skull. And as a baby, those bones are not fused yet. They're movable and malleable, so that's why babies' heads can change shapes very easily. But adults, our bones are already fused by the time we get to be older, and that's why our heads don't change shapes randomly. But you have an occipital bone in the back of your head. You have a frontal bone in the front, your forehead. You have a temporal bone by your ears on both sides, and then you have a parietal bone on the top of your head on both sides. And so those bones are what make up your skull. And so each of those bones should be able to kind of move individually as a baby, and you want them to start to expand. And the process that allows those bones to expand is the pressure coming from the inside. So you have pressure from fluid. You have cerebrospinal fluid inside your skull that surrounds your brain, and that fluid flows in and out from your brain, from your skull into your spinal canal, your spinal cord. And so your spinal cord and your brain are sitting in this cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid should naturally pump up and down your spine as you move and as you're going about your day. It should just naturally pump, and that pumping mechanism pressurizes the skull, and that's what allows the skull to want to have this nice round shape. But what can happen is there can become tension or stress in the skull itself, where we see those sutures. They can start to overlap, and that would be a stressor, and they can get hinged on one another. And so that would be one case where we might start to see different parts of the brain bulge out, or parts of the head bulge out, and lead to head misshapeness or flat spots on the head or bulging parts on the head. And so just talking about the different areas to look for. So let's say if your occiput is involved, if the suture of your occiput is overlapped with the parietal bones, then that could lead to your head being flat on the back. We see that a lot in babies. Um, but if it's more of a temporal bone issue, then you might see more like a shelf like bulging out on the sides, where you have like a shelf above your ears or the baby's ears. That it would be more of a parietal bone issue. The occipital or the parietal bone issue on the top of the head, if you have a bulging out in the back or in the front, that can both be related to parietal sutures being fused or overlapped, and it's not allowing the head to expand up, so it expands forward or backward. And then the frontal bone, if you have any issues where like an eyebrow is higher on one side as opposed to the other, that might be a sign that the frontal bone is having some issues where it's fused or stuck with another suture, okay? So those are all things that can happen just by the sutures being overlapping and not working properly or not moving properly. But in the case where there is what we call dural tension, what's going on in that situation is that pumping mechanism of fluid between the brain and the spinal cord, it's not happening properly. That pressurization of the fluid in the brain and the skull is not as much as it should be, and that can cause a lack of pushing out and lack of roundedness in the head, and that can start to cause some of the other issues that I just talked about. So why would the pressure not be working properly? Why would the pumping mechanism not be working properly? Well, it happens because of dural tension in the spine, okay? And so you have different ligaments, dural attachments, where your spinal cord actually attaches to the structures of your spine, both at the very top of your neck and at the base of your spine, in your sacrum, okay? So those are where the dural attachments are. And so if you have any misalignments or fixations in the bones of your spine, and that leads to tension in those ligaments, those dentate ligaments is what they're called, that can create dural tension, and that will decrease that pumping mechanism of fluid between the brain and the skull. All right, so that's dural tension when there's decreased pumping between the brain and the body. And like I said, a lot of times that's related to a misalignment in the upper neck or the lower spine. And same thing with torticollis. When there's tension in that spinal accessory nerve that is causing those muscles in the neck to be stiff and flexing and stuck, contracted, that again is related to some sort of misalignment in the upper neck a lot of times. And so as chiropractors, what we do is very specifically find the joints, the bones in the neck in a child that is not moving properly, and all it takes to adjust that misalignment or to correct that fixation is very gentle pressure. All right, it's about the same amount of pressure that it would take to check the ripeness of a tomato. So just a little bit of pressure, and holding that for a few seconds, we can then allow the baby's body to release that stress and tension, and we'll be able to actually feel it in our hands and fingers. It's amazing when you're able to get your hands on a baby and to feel that pressure and stress just release from their body. It's very, very cool. And then the changes, you can often see that happen immediately, whether it be them starting to turn their head and relax a lot more, and be able to latch immediately on both sides when they weren't able to latch on one side previously to the adjustment. So those are all really, really cool things that we get to see on a regular basis. There's other types of work that we can do when it comes to the cranium and all the sutures. There's cranial work that we're trained in, and we're able to find the specific sutures that are stuck or not moving properly, and we can very gently provide input into their skulls. And again, it's still very, very gentle, but it allows the mobilization of those stuck sutures, stuck bones in the skull, so the baby's brain can start to grow and to develop, and releases a lot of stress and tension out of their skull. So that's just another way we are able to help as well. It does take time and repetition, though. I always want to lay out the expectations. It's not usually a quick fix. It's not like an immediate fix for a baby that's had torticollis for months. It's not going to be just really, really that simple. A lot of times it takes some work to get to the root of what's going on and get to that point where the baby's body finally starts to relax. So the only really best way to tell is to come into our practice and to allow us to assess your child. We do some very specific scans on everybody, and especially babies, and they're very non-invasive. They just allow us to see where there's areas of tension and stress in a baby's spinal column, and we can also see if they have any additional stress or tension in their nervous system. Okay, if you guys have any questions about what we can do to help specifically for your child, please reach out. We'd be happy to get you guys the answers you're looking for. Or if you'd like to make an appointment, please reach out to us here as well, or on our website. I have all our contact information. We also have a few other workshops and in-office events coming up, so definitely check out our events tab on our Facebook page. Otherwise, I hope you guys got a lot of information out of this webinar, and look forward to chatting to you again soon. See ya.